Hello, everyone, and welcome to 100 Yards of Football Sports Talk Radio. I'm your host, Logan Landers, and today we have a very special episode. We're going to be talking about Elijah Molden, a player profile out of the University of Washington, the Huskies. And joining me today, I usually have my guy, the football encyclopedia, Vincent Turner, my amazing producer, Jeremiah Long, or Bobby Butler, or Kevin Jones, any of the guys of the crew. But today I had to bring on a specialist, someone that went to the University of Washington and who covers the team, Miss Kaila Olin. How you doing, Kaila?
I'm great. Thanks so much for having me. So excited to finally get some football going over here on the West Coast.
Oh, I know. I'm sure you're just dying for it because the Pac-12 haven't been able to start yet.
Exactly. But the nice thing is kind of being a fan a little bit and watching those games that are exciting and cheering for one team, but it really doesn't affect me that much. So
right. You don't have to worry about, having a stress anxiety attack every week with your team.
No heart attack Huskies yet. Give it 2 weeks.
Look, I'm from Atlanta, so I know all about the heartbreaks of teams and whatnot. So you don't have to tell me twice about that. But let's get into this. And let's talk about Elijah Molden, this very impressive recruit. He's at Washington at the moment. Let's talk about him. So he's 5'10", 190 pounds, a defensive back. He went to West Linn High School out of Oregon, and his career stats at West Linn, he had 74 tackles in total, 4 interceptions. He also played offense too as a running back because that's what a majority of players do in high school. 2,557 rushing yards, 36 touchdowns, and he was recruited by Washington, Oregon, Stanford, USC, but he ultimately chose to go to the Huskies. So, Kaila, my first question to you is, obviously this guy was very impressive coming out of high school. What were your thoughts about him whenever he was coming into the school?
So when he was kind of transitioning in, we just got off of our 2016 year where we had Kevin King, Buda Baker, Sidney Jones, JoJo McIntosh, Azim Victor. Our defense was stacked. And so to be honest, getting Elijah Molden in wasn't the number one priority. It was getting better from 2016 and kind of making it to another New Year's Six game. We figured that while those great players were leaving to go to the NFL, there was already some stacked talent in there. Didn't really expect him to play as a true freshman, which he ended up doing. And so while you have an excitement about him, it wasn't that full excitement of, hey, it's a new running back, we're going to use him right away, just because the room was so deep. But he proved very quickly that he was there to play and he was there to start as a freshman.
Yeah, it's always impressive for true freshmen to play, especially, we'll get into it in just a second, but he did pretty solid for his freshman year. You see a lot of freshmen either ride the bench, get that redshirt year out the way, or they absolutely, light the world on fire. He didn't start off too great, but he did pretty solid. Let's get into some of his stats here. So his 2017 freshman year, which was your senior year, you told me, he started 8 games, he had 19 tackles and 1 pass defended. So for his freshman year, which was your last year at the school, what did you think about him and how did you think he was going to project?
He was, I would say, projected to kind of be on par with that. Again, there was already so much talent there. You had other players like Ben Burke-Hervin, who was setting records at Washington with tackles in games, having about 20, 24 in games. So while that's different positions, that wasn't the main focus. And so for him to even get some tackles and pass breakups, that was a huge get and a great stepping stone to say, hey, yeah, we lost these great players, but now even a true freshman is coming in and making plays. That's really reassuring as a fan, as an analyst, even as a team.
Yeah, definitely a really solid start to his career, and it only got better. That was just the beginning. So his sophomore year, he had 11 games, 29 tackles, and 5 passes defended. But this past season was where he really kind of showed, he put his name on the map. 13 games, 79 tackles with 4 interceptions and 12 passes defended. So I think this last year, his sophomore year showed a really good improvement, but his past junior year really kind of made everyone kind of take a look at him, maybe kind of double check me like, man, this guy's got some pretty good hype around him out of Washington.
He definitely helped contribute even more than just those stats said. He was kind of a dynamic duo there with Miles Bryant, who went to the draft, who's now playing for the New England Patriots and is getting some reps there, but also those forced fumbles. Great teammate. He is quick. He has great hands. That's where that running back kind of position in high school really helped him, which you mentioned kind of transitions to every high school player. But consistently getting better was one of the best things. It wasn't just that he peaked his junior season or sophomore season and dropped off. he's continuing to grow. And he was coming into the season projected to be a first-team All-American with Pro Football Focus. So that is great, and hopefully something that he can live up to. He had draft talk from his junior season, decided to not go. He decided to stay. When COVID happened and Pac-12 announced they were canceling their season, he didn't opt out. He still wanted to stick it out, ride it out, maybe play in the spring. Now gets to play in the fall, but
yeah, he definitely made a good decision sticking around because, like I said, whenever all this COVID stuff started happening, no one even knew if there was going to be a season for any team. The Pac-12 is kind of starting late compared to everyone else. As we saw the SEC, ACC down here where I'm at, they've been playing for weeks now. So that's great. But it's good to see, everything somewhat getting back to normal, at least giving you something to watch on Saturdays. But Elijah Molden was definitely no joke. He was a very smart player. Was on academic all Pac-12 first team in 2018. He was on the honor roll as well in 2019. So that just shows you he's got some brains as well. But going into this 2020 season, he was projected on every single preseason list, basically, from a bunch of different sources. So he has a lot of hype around him coming into this season. And I know he's ready to kind of get everything going for everything to get back to normal for him to start giving wide receivers fits once again. So some of the things that I like about him is he's an amazing tackler. As we saw with those 79 tackles this past season, he's not afraid to get dirty with anyone. He can go up and he can tackle. He's really good at getting some passes defended as well. I put he's stuck like glue. And what I mean by that is simply he can stick onto any wide receiver that he faces, and he'll show you that he's going to be able to guard them and to give them fits and not make them get an easy catch. He also has really nice agility. Like we said, he was a running back going into college out of high school. So he has that great agility there. And he's got active hands. Like we said, also with that running back, he had to catch a bunch of passes as well. Really good. He's got a couple of interceptions to his name. And just really solid on playing as a D-back. He's got a really good future, I feel. I mean, this past 2019 season kind of showed that he is for real. And while he might not get looked at as one of the top D-backs in the country, mostly just because he does play at Washington and he's not at like an Alabama or another high-ranked school such as those teams, he is putting his work in and showing that he is worth all this hype that he's finally starting to get, and it's well-deserved as well. So that's why I also think he's underrated. It's mostly just based off that Washington Husky moniker of, well, you're not playing in a big conference. You're not playing in one of the conferences that we see a lot of high-profile people get drafted from. Now, we saw with Jacob Eason, he got drafted this past draft with the Colts. I believe we did a player profile on him, and he hasn't seen the field too much, but it could be different for Molden, though. He could be a kind of one of those sneaky draft picks that kind of gets in there and helps out a team. And finally, what I got is this is his last year to just kind of ball out and do whatever he wants to on the field. He's already ready for the season to get started. He's probably been working out day and night, watching a bunch of film, and he's ready. I got to ask you one question, Kaila. We've seen with a bunch of other conferences that the defense has been kind of rough for every conference, whether it's the NFL, whether it's college. How do you think he's going to hold out this upcoming season with all that time being missed?
What's kind of nice, and why you mentioned that, is that Washington never really slowed down in terms of their practices. They were still planning on having a season. After they announced that there was no season, they were still getting some workouts in. Mm-hmm. Again, there's not that live action contact. And I think when I did an interview with Yogi Roth with the Pac-12 Network, and we kind of touched on that a little bit. And not getting those live action scrimmages, the snaps, to really work on those defensive tackling, because you can't really tackle air and get good at it, right? So that's something that they kind of were lacking, and I think what we've seen with other conferences lacking defensively as well, but kind of sticking in that mentality and workout and not really ever taking a break. At most, it was maybe 2 weeks. When they started, it wasn't full pads or anything like that. And even now, kind of keeping them a little bit more limited numbers. Washington has had. They've had 3 so far. They've had 3 scrimmages where they split up the teams, and then it's an actual game. They've had them different times, and they have 1 more to do this coming weekend. So that's kind of something that Jimmy Lake has taken since becoming head coach. and transitioning to having more game-like scenarios and not just practices. So I think that's really going to help him there. And the tackling-wise, last season, Washington was turning 2 starters on defense. Elijah Molden was one of them. And so having just such a solid unit that's returning a lot of players, it's a lot easier transition than, say, like you said, LSU, Alabama, who continuously loses those same types of players over and over again and has to refine new starters year in and year out.
Yeah, so if you kind of think about it, he kind of has a head start on some other teams just based off the fact that, like you said, he hasn't missed that much practice. They've been doing work over there in Washington for months on end now, just kind of patiently waiting for the season to start. I believe their first game is scheduled for November. I'm correct, right?
Yeah, November 7th against Cal down in Berkeley at 7:30 p.m. So it's that Pac-12 after dark game. Last year when they had that game with Cal here in Montlake, it was a lightning storm, and the game actually didn't finish until 2 a.m. our time. So people were waking up on the East Coast and watching us play still. So that's a huge game for the Dogs to kind of go in.
Yeah, I think that'll be a good first game as well for them to just kind of get their feet wet and get used to this season, because we've seen, like you mentioned LSU, so I'm going to bring it up. LSU has looked absolutely horrible this year. Granted, they lost a majority of their team though to the draft, which, I mean, that 2019 championship team was no joke with Joe Burrow and everyone else on that team. They were absolutely stacked, but it's mostly their defense. And I know if our coaching extraordinaire Kevin Jones was here, he'd be throwing fits too, because he's a defensive guru. So he watches every week and he thinks, man, I wish I was on these teams, kind of straighten these guys out. But I think it's going to be good for Washington, because like you said, they're going to have a good bit of starters returning, which is something that a lot of the higher profile teams can't say, like the Georgias and the LSUs. So I think that will help them. And I think Molden especially is going to kind of shine with that, because he's going to know all the plays. He's going to know all of his personnel around him. So he's really going to thrive in that environment in his last year. And I think that could potentially bump his draft stock even more, if that's even possible. So one more question for you, and I'll let you do a little bit of self-promoting. Where do you think he's going to get drafted, or do you have a team in mind?
I think he goes second round.
Mm-hmm.
Second round, mid to late second round, maybe even early third. You're going to want to look at a team who really struggles with defense right now. And even not necessarily pass rushing, because he can get in the backfield, but he kind of does a better job at dropping back. And Seattle, while they were known to have their defense, really, really lacked that. Dallas Cowboys have the worst defense right now. They're my team, so I know that. Would love to see him go there. But other teams that kind of give up a lot of yards, and especially in the air. Teams that are playing kind of more the higher passing profiles. Rams don't need him. Arizona Cardinals don't need him. I'm kind of naming teams over here, but Steelers don't really need him, right?
Right.
It's the teams that face a little bit more of that pass, where Seattle Seahawks, they run the ball. Teams in the NFC West don't need him. Teams where you're now facing kind of Tom Brady, or Cam Newton passes a little bit. He likes to drop back into coverage. He likes to even keep the ball himself. Other teams over there on the AFC, that's going to find a good home for him.
Yeah, I think I really like that Cowboys pick, because we do a lot of Dallas Cowboys stuff over here. We have a partnership with our newspaper, with the Dallas Weekly out there in Texas. So we do a weekly Cowboys segment each week. So we know all about the struggles that they've had and all the injuries that they've had. And he would fit in great, because they need some people out there in the backfield. They let go of Clinton Dix. And they've, just injuries have kind of really hurt that team. And I think that, like you said, I could see Molden being a second or third round pick. I'm thinking more second. If he has a really good year, then that'll kind of cement it for me. I'm still a little bit on the edge about the third round, just because if he has a kind of subpar season, he's probably going to drop to late second or early third. But I do expect him to get drafted when his name gets called, and whenever the draft's going to be, who knows. But I do think he's going to have a really great year for the Huskies and help them, hopefully back to their winning ways and continue that great Husky tradition that I think you know all too well.
And what's to kind of really wrap that up, and we mentioned not really having a season with the Pac-12. We have guaranteed 7. We have 6. We're playing our 5 division, 1 crossover, and then that other game will be either that Pac-12 championship game or another crossover with the South. So that is not a lot of film for scouts or anybody who's constantly watching these LSU teams, or Bama and Ohio State now playing already. So best case scenario is that he absolutely balls out and has a great season, does get drafted in that second round. Fingers crossed first, right? But worst case scenario, he has a pretty bad season. The team has a bad season as a whole. There's no eligibility counting against these players right now. So he can even, if he wants to stay for another year, he has that option to do so.
Yeah, that is a very good point, because that's the thing is some guys aren't having the best year. Let's just go with like a Jarrett Garantano per se, because we cover the Vols here a good bit too, and he hasn't had the best season. He might hop back in for that next year. So that could help, a plethora of guys who aren't having the best season, whether it be injuries or whatever. So that is always an option in the back of their mind. But like you said, hopefully he has another great year and builds off that success of the 2019 season. And that way he can get drafted, fingers crossed, first round, like you said. Or like we said, I think he's going to be a really solid second round pick if he does have a solid year. So Kaila, I know you got a little bit of self-promoting to do. Why don't you go ahead and get that out? Let people know where they can find you, where they can listen to you, and all that good stuff.
Yeah, so you can follow me on all of my accounts at Kaila Olin, KailaOlin, not a Kayla with a Y, because my parents don't want me to have any keychains or souvenirs growing up. Or you can also check out, I do videos, I write articles, my podcasts, all of those are on Sports Illustrated. So kind of just where I spend most of my time, si.com/college/Washington. And I'm a marketing director for an upcoming football film. The Don James documentary, The Dog Father, basically is coming out here soon. We're covering a bunch of things. We have interviews going on with coaches from all over, from all the conferences, even some down your way. So that's going to be a great thing to really check out here. Hopefully in the next year or so, COVID really slowed that one down a little bit. But the trailer, teaser, everything like that's on there. And then kind of like I said, I have 2 podcasts that I do host, Dog Thoughts and On Second Thought. I do those twice a week, kind of just little mini segments talking about what's going on right now, what to expect. Just touched on the new uniforms that Washington dropped for their blackout alternative jerseys. So it's a bunch of fun things like that. It's not all serious in numbers, but there is some numbers for kind of stat nerds like me too.
Yeah, so everyone be sure to go follow Kaila on all of her social medias. Be on the lookout for that upcoming documentary whenever it will be released. I'm sure it's going to be awesome. Like you said, with the Dog Father, of course. Be sure to check out her podcast as well. I'm sure she's going to get a few hits from us over there. Let her know that the 100 Yards Football family sent you over there. And let me just say thank you for coming on the show, Kaila. It was a really fun time. I'm glad we were able to have this chat about Elijah Molden.
No, thank you so much for having me. It's been super fun. And if you ever need anyone for Pac-12, I got you. That's all I do on my Saturdays is watch football. So
all right, I'll be sure to keep your number close, and I'll be sure to let you know if we ever need you back on here. So once again, thank you very much for coming on the show. It was a blast. So if you guys enjoyed this video, over on our Facebook, over on our YouTube, and our Twitch, where we are streaming live like we do every week. It's mostly on Mondays, sometimes other days of the week, but we always do live videos every single Monday with myself, our producer, Jeremiah Long, Mr. Football, the Encyclopedia, Vincent Turner, former Atlanta Falcon, Bobby Butler, Kevin the Bull Jones, who is our coaching extraordinaire, and anyone else that we have on our team. We also have some basketball coming up with Coach Brian Spencer. So we do talk a little bit about everything over here. I mentioned a little bit of baseball whenever it comes to terms. I know it just wrapped up. I'll be doing a little post-game kind of wrap-up of the season on Monday, so you guys can check out that. Also, be sure to check out our podcast, where we are being sponsored by the Believe Podcast Network, who helps us out, gave us a podcast deal where we are on Spotify, Apple, Stitcher, Google Podcast, or anywhere you like your audio experience. We are there. And Kaila, I'm just telling you now, this episode we are recording right now will be uploaded tonight. So I will be sure to share it with you, share it with everyone else. If you're a big Huskies fan, be sure to let everyone know what we're doing here, and share it in the Facebook groups and everything like that. So for my guest, Kaila Olin, I'm your host, Logan Landers, and this has been 100 Yards of Football Sports Talk Radio. We'll be talking to you guys very soon. See you.